Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you all so much for joining us for our Fireside chat with Stacy's Pita Chip founder, Stacy Madison. We're here today on behalf of Alice, the Intelligent Business Advisor, and Stacys Rise project, which we'll talk a little bit about, which is an amazing community and endeavor to help support women entrepreneurs. My name is Michele Perras. I'm with Alice. I'm the COO, and I'm so excited to be able to talk today with Stacy about her journey from her first company to what she's doing today with Be Bold bars and everything else. So Stacy, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's really special to be here.
Great. So a little bit of how this will work. We'll be with Stacy for an hour today, and you'll have the ability, audience participants, to be able to ask questions in the Facebook feed. So if you have anything that you want to let her know about, please drop it in, and we'll respond to them as we go through. So Stacy, your story is the classic entrepreneur's journey. You started with a food cart in Boston, had a previous background in social work, same with your former business or your business partner, Mark. You listened to your customers, you grew like crazy. If you look at all of the playbooks that you have out here now for how to build and scale your business, it looks like, what you did back in those early days in the 90s follows that. Could you talk a little bit about those early days and what inspired you to open that first sandwich cart? How did you get there?
Yeah, sure. So originally I was living with Mark, because Mark and I were also friends, business partners, married, divorced, and still business partners, which people find that part of it remarkable as well. But I was, at the time, I was living in Hawaii with Mark. He was doing an internship at the VA hospital for his doctorate in psychology. And while I was out there, I got a job at a place that was it was a restaurant. I was an assistant manager, and they were opening up a second restaurant, a location that they wanted to do a complete surf theme restaurant.
Oh, fun.
And they said, well, do you want to come and be a part of this and be a manager? And I was like, yeah, it was kind of moving up, and it was such a fun thing to do, because looking back on it, I really got a lot of experience on how to start and open and grow a business and everything that happens both before, during, and after. The long story short of it, I was part of a big grand opening, and we had all these old surfers there hanging their surfboards on the wall, and they, I was promised a big bonus at the end if this goes well. And the radio stations were there. It was a zoo. It was crazy. They're bringing in money left and right, stuffing it in a box, putting it in a basement. I mean, it was insane.
Wow.
Successful opening of this surf theme restaurant. Then a couple weeks later, I was like, well, we hit all our targets. I sat down with the manager. When do we get our bonuses? Blah, blah, blah. He's like, well, let me talk to the owners. A couple weeks later, sit down with them again. And he says, well, I spoke to the owners, and now that we're open, it appears we're a little overstaffed. We're going to have to let you go.
Oh,
and
no.
I had never lost a job. I had, I was working 80 hours a week. I was like, my heart was fully into this. Like,
oh my goodness,
we're going to make it happen. And, I was just really devastated. Mark really wanted to kill him. And, and it turns out, and I spoke to my aunt on the phone who was in the wet restaurant business. And what she said to me, she said, are you an idiot? She said, this is the restaurant business. They do that all the time. They overhire to get a place open, and then they let people go. And I wasn't the only one let go. There was a whole bunch of people, if there's any comfort in that. But at the same time, I really felt like, if I could work this hard for somebody else and make it successful, then it really did prove to myself that I could do it on my own. And that's what kind of kicked in this, I'm going to do it on my own for both myself and for Mark. I mean, having him go through, be a part of it too. When I went through all this, he was like, we could do this. We could do this. He always had a passion for food and the food industry too, even though we're both in different careers. But
That's amazing. And so what was it then, like moving from social work, which, you're interacting with one person at a time, you're going really deep with them, to something like food service where you're interacting with tons of people, it's really dynamic. Was that, was the way that you were working really attractive around wanting to make that switch as well? How did that inform your decision?
So we had a really, what we like to say, I mean, our staff, by the time that we sold, we had about 300 people working there. And we used to say that we had very good mental health situation there. We did a lot for, for job satisfaction and making it a great place to work. We won, best places to work in Boston and multiple times. And just because, and I think that having a background in psychology and social work helped with that.
That's fantastic.
It also helps with customer relations and, and the people that you're servicing. And, I mean, it helps. You don't even know how far that goes, as well as networking. When you really need to get something done, you don't know how to do it, and you're reaching out to others for help, and that kind of thing helps to not be afraid to do that.
That's amazing, being able to pull all of that knowledge and learning into everything that you're doing, and you started to do as well with the sandwich cart. So you moved back to Boston. I believe the name of your first cart was Stacy's Delights with like an apostrophe, which I love. And you invested a lot in the look and the feel of maybe not the first cart, but the second cart with the awning and making it look like a deli counter. When you started to do that, and have your sandwiches and then your pita chips, maybe talk a little bit about how you built out the brand, showing up, being there on the streets with everybody else in the competition. What was that like in those, when you kind of went back and landed and we're thinking about how are you going to do this and how are you going to bring it to market?
Well, it sounds kind of archaic because what we did, now in the days of, Instagram and Twitter and all the social media and everything, where we did not have that. I mean, this was 1997. This is just when email was getting big. And we were down in the financial district and people emailed the other people in the company and said, "Ooh, I just had the best lunch." And that kind of, that really did help because email was just starting.
Right.
But when we first started, we were making the sandwiches on pita bread, and you can run out of anything on the cart, but really if you run out of bread, you're closed. So we always over purchased all of this bread and we gave them away to people standing in line that were waiting for their sandwiches. And people said, "Well, I'm having a party. Can you make me some more?" and things like that. And so people kind of got used to having the pita chips there. And it was a good way to keep the customer happy as they waited in line. Fast forward now, you come to the fall or the winter time in New England, and it's rough. It's rough. It starts to get cold. You're standing out there in snow pants. You're like, okay, this is for the birds, So, and like, what am I, what we were like, what are we doing kind of thing. So we tried to find some other avenues that we could take so we had to take a look at it like as a whole, right? What are we going to do? Are we going to get multiple carts? Are we going to try to find an indoor location? Are we going to do, how are we going to grow this business or another? Because we were also making all of these pita chips, something that became a small thing to keep customers happy as they were waiting online. Now, we had to order way more bread because people were chomping these things down. So now we kind of got two things going at the same time. So we really had to came to this inception in the business where we had to make a choice. And Mark and I decided that we would have the opportunity to get larger faster if we went in the direction of the pita chips. And over the winter, I would design the bag and work on the shelf life testing and the equipment and the facility and kind of what we needed to do to get it started. But we really had to make, that was a big decision point that we had to go for.
Of course. And when you were starting to, think about all of those things, testing your recipes, the shelf life and the bagging and manufacturing and that, what was that process like? How did you think about scale, and how did you learn how to, reaching out to your network and folks of getting that kind of information around, what kind of packaging did you use as an example?
Right. So a lot of networking, and you got to remember, we have two things going on, like two parallel paths going on at the same time, because we have the food cart and we have the pita chips. And, we couldn't, the food cart was our bread and butter, so we couldn't just let that go. At the same time, we were getting a lot of rejection when we were trying to find indoor locations. People were, they're like, stand in line behind Dunkin' Donuts and Oban Pan were the big ones then. Starbucks was just starting to get big. So there was a lot of doors being closed in our face at that point too. And, with the pita chips, I basically went to a lot of neighborhood, like the neighborhood development center and any place that was there that would help. There was this one woman who used to come to the cart, and she used to stand in line, and she was like, how do you know how much bread to order each day? And how do you know, and ask me all these weird questions. Just, she's getting her sandwich, right? There's a big long line. She's asking me about my bread inventory. And, and it turns out, and I finally one day I said, why do you ask me all these things? She said, well, I teach a business plan boot camp, and I use your cart as an example all the time. And I'm like, really? I said, can I take it? And she's like, you want to take it? I'm like, yeah, and so that's how I ended up writing my first business plan. Because when I first started, when we were making the pita chips, I thought that I needed $20,000 for a packaging machine. But after I did the business plan, I realized I needed $20,000 for the machine, and then I needed $20,000 for the bags to put the chips in, and then I needed another $20,000 for this working capital kind of thing. So all of this you don't learn when you're going to get your social work degree. So I did 8 weeks. Each week was a different chapter of the business plan, and it ended with being able to pitch it to a bank.
Fantastic.
And so, like organizations like yours, which I wish were around when we were starting, because this is the exact kind of thing that would have helped, lead me through the process. Where here I was, I was a smart, well-educated girl. I just didn't know how to get from point A to point B.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that. And so you leaned on your network, you found the resources that were available to you, and you got a loan. And so how, when you did, you got your loan, you bought your machine, you invested in the packaging. What was the immediate aftermath of that like? Did you guys go on a sort of rocket ship going forward, or was it more of an incremental scale? What was the next step in that scale journey?
So it was a lot of ups and downs, because just when you think that something is starting to take off, you just crash and burn. And a lot of people compare it to being on a roller coaster, and it is very, very much true. So for example, I said the $20,000, right? I needed a packaging machine, bags, working capital. So I ordered my bags. It was very important for us to be able to see the product, because this was a time when people just didn't know what a pita chip was. So we felt like, well, the brand's not so important. We shrink down the brand. We can put that up later, and we make it so that people can really see the product. And so we put a window in the bag. If you think of an old, like a coffee bag with a little window in it, that's what we did. So we spent like we bought like 10,000 bags, spent $10,000. We get them all delivered in. We start making them and packing them. And what we found when we started shipping them out, we found out like they'd arrive at the customers, and the chips were sharp, and they would pierce through the window. And so now we had $10,000 worth of bags that have this beautiful window, and all of them fall, like half of the window and the chips fall out the front of the bag, So but that's just like one example from the very beginning. Take that and multiply it by a gazillion further down the road, when everybody thinks, oh, you don't have any problems when you get bigger, and now there's a big fire in the plant or something like that. It's like, it's the same thing. It's the same thing, whether, you try to get a piece of equipment and you don't get your equipment, or your chips fall through the front of the bag, or, and so that's why, people say, oh, she got lucky. And what they don't hear and realize is all that, like you guys are listening to right now, all of those things that at each and every inception of one of those hardships, you have to be making those decisions that are going to get you over the hump. And all of those decisions that you may or may not have made correctly are what puts you over the finish line in the end.
That's amazing. And so when you think then too about those decisions, like thinking about your team, so it's you and Mark, and you mentioned earlier, you were business partners, you were romantic partners, you were married, you were then separated and divorced, but still maintained your business together. There's something really amazing about finding the folks that have the same values as you, and can work and complement each other. So I don't know if you'd like to talk a little bit about, how you worked with Mark, and then also how you hired people in and what values. We have a question around the company values from a small startup moving up to hundreds of employees, but maybe thinking about, what kind of company did you want to have? You talked earlier as well about, the restaurant saying, oh, we're going to overhire and then we're going to get rid of everybody that, participated in that. When you thought about building your own business, what were some of the things that you wanted your business to look like?
Yeah. So you learn what not to do on experiences like that, how it feels to be on the other end. And so when you are building your company, each and every person out there needs to not forget what it feels like to be on the other side. And, we did, and how important each and every person is. The person, at one point we had 90 people back there, pulling bread apart. It's exhausting to do that all day long. And, some of these really monotonous jobs, those people are really valuable. You have to think, well, what am I going to do as an organization to make this a little bit, like to have those people be as engaged in this whole thing as we are. And, when it comes to hiring, I wish we had the money to build out our team sooner than we did. I think going back, I probably would have done that and not done so much on our own. I think right now there are a lot more avenues that you can go. So for example, in the natural food business, there's people out there that share CFOs and that share a sales team, and where a lot of that wasn't around. But, I think things like that, where anytime that you can do something like that to offset your costs as you build out your team, is really important. The first person on board was my brother, and who's also the person I'm doing the Be Bold bars with now. So he also had his doctorate in psychology. And we said to him, he was in there one day helping us bag chips, and we said, so you want to sell chips sometime? And we were just joking around and stuff. And then he came back, a month or so later, and he's like, you know what? If I don't do it now, then when am I going to do it? So he put kind of his career on hold, which he also didn't ever end up going back to because we had this decade-long growth. But he came on board. So I think the first people that we had in the company were basically friends and family. And one reason is, through the whole lifespan of the company, we always we lived and breathed by surrounding ourselves with believers. If you got to be a believer. And a lot of people that took a lot of sacrifices in the beginning because they were just fully, let's do this. And that's what makes a great team.
That's fantastic.
And you know what? And then when you step outside friends and family, one thing that I used to say a lot when I'd speak at Babson a lot, and one thing that they always asked on this same topic was, how do you figure out who's going to be a good fit or not? And I used to say, click and tick, right? You have to find out those two things. Number one does this person click with the rest of the team? You know what I mean? Right. Is there a match? Are they kind of identified? We all kind of have, because you got to be together a lot. And you're
going to be spending a lot of long nights together, a lot of long days. Yeah. Like, it isn't just like a 9 to 5, see you later. It's like in the early days, it's a big investment.
Yeah. So you
Yeah.
have to have them come in and
Mm.
spend some time with the staff and see how things are run and, get into it. So, what makes that person click? And this is the same whether it was on the, whether the business large or even today at my juice bar, you got to come in, you got to work for the first week and see, if we like you, you like us, and
Yep.
that shit matters.
Yeah.
Then, what makes them tick was the other thing that was very important, just as a business owner, to find out what is it that is important to this person and why are they here. So for example, we had this one woman that was in charge of quality control or something, and she taught yoga on Tuesdays from 1 to 3. She worked for Nokia or AT&T or one of these large companies, and she was coming on board because this was her past career, and she's kind of thinking about going back to it. And the one thing that she couldn't do when she worked for the phone company was she had to give up teaching this class, and that was most important. And I was like, well, look, we can't afford you. This is too much. She took a $20,000 pay cut to come on board just so she could teach that yoga class on Tuesdays. It was her sanity. It was that Tuesday. So we're like, hey, we can work around that. You can, make your hours, and, and she ended up working twice as many hours as we expected. But that Tuesday, everybody knew that those Tuesday afternoons were hers.
That's amazing. And I think to your point around, finding what makes people tick, finding what's important to them, being able to support them. It's not just the role, it's like everything that goes around it, and knowing your people like their family, because they are.
Yeah.
And so, you build this really successful regional business. You get your first $60,000 grant from the local bank in Boston. You start to think about like investing in manufacturing and scaling that out. And so, when you think about going beyond regional, what was that like for you, and how did you get capital to be able to do so, and distribution as well? You're starting to see some really great success.
So very different than today, because it was during the day when banks would actually loan you money. And so in the beginning, we ran up our credit cards. We did that credit card shuffle that everybody on this call has probably done. Oh, 0% interest. Okay, here we go. We switch to the next one. Keep careful track of that so you don't get your interest rate. We did that for years. We did that credit card shuffle. So after we got our $60,000 loan, then we went and we applied for, within 6 months, we applied for $500,000. And they were like, no, no, I don't think so. Not without equity. And Mark and I looked at each other and we laughed, and we were like, what do you mean not without equity? We don't, in equity in what? What do we have? I'm driving a Jeep that doesn't have a roof. You just put on a poncho if it rains. I mean, what would you like to take? You want it, it's yours, kind of thing. But we were also like, we're not gonna, then maybe it's not the right decision for us right now, and we'll just stay small and grow slower. And so back and forth a little bit, and the end of it is that they ended up giving us 300,000, not 500,000. We went back, we rewrote it, and that's when we started working with the SBA. And so they gave a SBA guarantee on the loan, and we had to come up with like 10 or 20%. And that's when we reached out to friends and family, and everybody kicked in $5,000 to get the guarantee on the loan.
Wow.
And it was a very happy day when further down the road, we were able to pay everybody back double. Like, really proud of, hey, in 3 years they made their 5 became $10,000. So everybody was happy with that. So
That's amazing. And so you get your capital, you get your 300 grand. And so, at this point, you have a small manufacturing. How are you manufacturing? Like, do you have machines at this point? And how did you think about, you've got your business plan, now you get this loan. What does that next phase of work look like in terms of building out the supply and then putting it out to market?
Right. So two things. So at one point, you get this pivot when you're looking for money, and then all of a sudden, once you start making money, it pivots, and then the banks start coming to you and say, well, you can buy a building and you can do that. Then they want to loan you all this money kind of thing. When we got the 300,000, one of the reasons they said yes was because we had customers, and I was able to get letters from the stores and from the airlines, and I got letters that I included in this second round that said, if you could make them, we would be interested in buying them. Non-committal, not an order, so nobody got in trouble, but just a little note saying that, hey, we'd be interested if you can make enough to sell to us. And so that really helped give strength to our business plan. Okay. Now at this point we were working in the Boston Pretzel Bakery. Another woman who had a cart downtown said, oh, why don't you try to make them in our oven? And she had, 40 rack oven or whatever. But we realized that we had to start making them on a larger scale. So after we got the loan, and we realized we had to, we can only go so far in her location. You're in somebody else's, she's working it at night, we're working it during the day, the place is 24-hour kind of thing. We really get our own place.
Got it.
So we used the money to go to actually move into, there was a Sealy mattress factory that we renovated the whole thing and just made it a big pita chip plant.
Wow, that's amazing. Oh my
goodness. There was like one step in between a smaller building, but we kind of moved one to the other. But ultimately, that's where we land.
That's fantastic. And for distribution, so a lot of the things that we see in the Woman Made community on Alice is around like, how do you land those distribution deals, and then how do you get your products on shelf? And actually, maybe to take a step back, when you were building your business back in the 90s and the early 2000s, you mentioned as well that there was no internet really to speak of other than email, and that was a great way for people to be able to share back and forth, talking about the cart and then subsequently the pita chips themselves. But how did you get your product in front of customers? You said that, you're kind of educating a market. People need to know what a pita chip is. And you referenced earlier sampling. So maybe to tell us a little bit in that early customer phase, how did you think about sampling? And then also, how did that change as well as you started to get bigger and bigger deals and bigger distribution?
Right. So we always said, in order to educate the consumer, really, we had to sample.
Right.
And I learned from, his name was Ken. I don't remember his last name, but he was the founder of Smart Food.
Ah, okay.
And he was kind enough to meet with me one day, and they had such great marketing at the time, and he said, you really have to, when it comes to sampling, you have to really be conscious of your money and your spend. And if you think of it as a fire hose that's kind of going like this, it's like, that's not how you put out a fire. You go like this and you aim it directly at the one spot. And that's kind of, that visual always stuck with me with the sampling. And that really was how we spearheaded our entire sampling program. We had a program, it was called Chipping In at the time. That was kind of what we called it. And so if anybody ever asked for a donation or anything like that, we had one intern from Northeastern who ran our Chipping In program. And part of that was to evaluate, is this a place where we sell chips? Can we sell chips? Is this a way to get us into the store? So, somebody, they're having a walk for their child and it goes in front of, their local market. And so, well, does their local market have the chips? And then the people are like, oh, I don't know if they have the chips or not. And then half the time, the person would go into the store and say, they're willing to sponsor us, we'd love to have the chips. And like those people really became your advocates and our salespeople. And then, we're like, sure, we can donate because people can see, oh, they're available right here in this store behind me kind of thing. So it's really important to have your sampling program specifically targeted rather than just feeding the masses.
Right. That's incredible.
One other thing is because we were doing our own manufacturing, we had an enormous amount of screw ups. bags that were underweight or overweight, or, you know, I mean, when you start to put them on that machine that starts to go boop, 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 and spit them out really fast, and then all of a sudden the machine's making a mistake, all of a sudden you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all of these like reject bags that you either have to open them up or like, what are you gonna do with them? So we used to save all of those for our chipping in program.
Fantastic. Oh, that's great. So that's a really great, smart way to then reinvest the inventory that you can't sell out on shelves or wherever, but it's going to serve a purpose for you. So it's not a total loss.
You say it way better than I do.
Well, I didn't have to go through the emotion of doing it at the time. So I'm like, oh,
that's what I meant.
Exactly. And so actually maybe some of those things, like, you know, some of the challenges that you've had, you mentioned there was a fire earlier, you mentioned, you know, the Boston winters, all of these things are in about making those decisions. And it's the sort of the impact of all those decisions at the end of the day that are going to help determine your success. You know, what are the things that any advice that you'd have for other founders or entrepreneurs as they're making those decisions and kind of dealing with some of those setbacks?
You know, definitely your support team is important. I don't know. I think there's probably a lot of women on the phone. Some of our setbacks were definitely related to the fact that this is a female kind of spearheading this business. I mean, when we would go into the middle of the country and meet with some machine guy, and he would shake hands with everybody in the circle except for me. And I was just like, I was just livid. And, you know, but you have to step back. And for me, at least in that type of situation at that time, maybe I would have handled it differently today. But at that time, I realized, you know, that it's probably better for Mark and Dave to handle that than for myself. That would probably get further faster if just one of those guys did that and I did something else, and we just, because, you know, I'm not going to change this person at that moment, and I really needed them. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but
I think
I just feel like it's important to realize like who's doing what best and when.
And the context, right? So if you guys have a goal, you know, you got to figure out the best way to get there.
Yeah. And you know what? There were times that I would just like bawl my eyes out crying. And then, you know, and I don't know, maybe women are just more naturally emotive and would handle something in one way as compared to, you know, when guys might handle the same situation. But you know what? It's okay to just bawl your eyes out. And then, you know, you kind of start, for me, I have to get it out of me. And then I can go back and then I can think straight. But I'm not going to think straight if I don't bawl my eyes out first and get past that emotion, and then I'm okay.
Yeah.
So try not to do it that often, but it does happen.
Well, I think it's part of, you know, the whole idea of making sure that you're taking care of yourself as well as much as you're taking care of your team or your customers or whomever it is that you're working with, making sure that you're also finding that time to take care of yourself and knowing what you need. I think a lot of times founders will put that on the back burner because there's so much, like, it's starting a company is not an easy lift. It's a long, heavy slog. And so making sure that you're also taking care of yourself is really important as well.
So for me, exercising was really a big thing to keep my sanity, but I didn't have time to do that. And so I integrated it into our everyday. And so I didn't put myself first, but at the same time, well, I kind of did, because I would lunge across the warehouse, right? I'm like, I don't have time to go and do my lunges. I'm going to get these stupid things in if it's the end of me. So anytime I had to walk across the warehouse, then everybody would see me, you know, she's lunging. Okay, you want to walk with me? That's fine. Start lunging, because this is the only way I'm not getting to the gym, so I'm going to do it right here. Right. And you know, that's kind of, you know,
that's amazing. Oh, and maybe as well, perhaps in the day before, like YouTube and Instagram, so we could do those things. And
yeah,
like the Staceys meme would be awesome.
You can do all kinds of wacky things you can't do nowadays.
Oh, that's so great. And so, you know, I think you sold your company in the mid 2000s to Frito. Maybe to talk, like, what was that like? What was the thing when you were, building out this amazingly successful business? You have a great team. You've got all these things that are lined up. And what was the thing for you that, why did you want to, or why did you decide to think about, okay, people are coming knocking on our door. Is this a thing that we should do? And how did you make that decision?
So originally, we didn't want to sell. I mean, definitely we didn't. And I see a lot of people starting their businesses now with an exit strategy. Mm. And I feel like just, me personally, I think they teach that a lot in business school, but I feel like that's an unhealthy way to start your business. Mm. We're building our business because we wanted to do something that we love to do every day and make a living doing it. Make enough to be able to afford a car payment or buy homes or pay off those student loans, things like that. So we were just looking to make a living doing what we love to do every day. And that was it. We didn't want to do our laundry based on dumping those quarters out of the basket. Right. So then fast forward 9 years later, I had twin girls on my own. So I had two girls. Mark, had always wanted to travel and never, you could never leave for long enough for him to go and travel. So I think he was kind of ready. And we got approached by one of like the largest food companies in the world that was interested. And that's what kind of spurred our conversation. And we said, well, maybe not right now. Then they came back a couple months later, and they came back, and 2 and 3, there were 3 of the largest food companies all came back months later. And we said, we really should, let's have this discussion. I think at that point in time, we were both ready, and we didn't want to do it on our own. Obviously, we knew we shouldn't do it on our own. So we got together an investment bank team, an accounting firm, a law firm, and then we started, we interviewed all of the investment bank teams. And again, same thing. We went through like 10 meetings, 10 presentations until we found out the right investment bank team, where this guy walked from Houlihan Lokey in Chicago. I can't say enough, because they walked in and they were believers. They were believers from the way that we structured the deal to,
great.
He knew everything. This guy that worked with us, he knew everything. He walked through the plant and he's like, oh yeah, if a company comes in, they'll be able to, turn those chips that are on the floor into money. And, he kind of got it. And they were, when you're building that team, even when it comes to selling your company, it's important to get those kinds of people on board as well. So after that, then they were able to put it out to other buyers, whether they were financial buyers or, so other people that we never even would have known to go to. So, it's a really difficult process when it comes to selling your company and getting all the information that you need, and the fact that you can't tell your people. So now you've worked for a decade with all of these people that really, they say you just have to keep this confidential the whole way through. So you're trying to run the company and sell the company and do all this all at once. And it's really a difficult position to be in, both from every level.
Yeah, of course. And it sounds like, so you sell to Frito, you go through this process, which is incredible, and incredibly challenging and a big learning experience as well. And so what happened after you sold? How did it change the company? What did you decide to do? And, the process has been over 10 years now. And what was that like?
So we definitely, Frito was the best buyer for us. And they had the same beliefs. They really wanted us to, as the leader of their healthy snack portion of their portfolio, which was, it kind of aligns with, that's who we want to hand our baby to, rather than, to an investment firm. There were offers that were more money, that were performance-based, that were stay on board, that were all of this. And so you have to really mentally know what you want when you go to sell. So, it was hard. And then after I sold, I had an arrangement that I could stay on and work for like 20 days. And I ended up going in every single day to try to help transition the company. Ultimately, now that I look back on it, I probably was more in the way than anything else. But you get to this point when the company sells where you say, what do I do now? What am I going to do now? I mean, I have done this every single day and night, and I'm lunging across the warehouse. Now, what am I doing? I've got and Grant, I know I have 2 little kids and all this, so yes, I could do a lot with that, but it's just, you just are, for me, and I think for a lot of people, you were just completely lost, and you don't want to go through I want to start up another company. You don't sell one company and go, yeah, let's do it again. I mean, by any means. And then when I went in, the people who were working there also probably had a sense of, well, they've been reporting to me for so long. Now there's somebody else to report to, and now there's other meetings and, different requirements from them. And so who do they go to? And then your customers who have always reached out to you directly, now they're reaching out to somebody else. And if something goes wrong, then so I really don't feel like I added a lot of benefit when I was there that first year, but I'm hoping that even doing things like this, that I'm adding a little bit more benefit now, because it's, it's 12 years later, and Stacey's is really still in my heart and soul. So, so now I've done more, I've started doing more as, with Frito, Stacy, and Pepsi, and, their teams kind of change over time as well. So different levels of involvement for myself, but I'm good with it all now.
That's great. Well, and I think that you really kind of, those first months and years after you sell it's a lot of change, because this is something where it's like you've been living and breathing this for the last however many years, and now it's different. But that hasn't necessarily stopped you from being an entrepreneur. So now you have a bunch of new ventures, which is absolutely amazing. The juice bars, the Be Bold bars. What is different this time around, now that you have, the experience of taking a company and scaling it and selling it and being able to participate in other endeavors? What's different now for you, and, about launching these brands in the market, distribution, marketing, all those things that are now, there's more at our disposal perhaps, and maybe less as well. I don't know.
So the juice bar was, I have to say, I started that 5 or 6 years ago. And that was more it was like a passion project. And it was also a lot of, for those years after I sold, kind of floundering around a little bit, not sure exactly what I wanted to do or how to do it, when all I knew how to do was the pita chip company. And so after not being able to kind of find where I belonged, then I said, well, you know what, I'm just going to build it myself, like the juice bar, and just do everything that I love under one roof, right? I like going to the trade shows. I like finding new products. I like creating new foods. I like making healthy salads. So it's like kind of like all of that under one roof. At the same time, my kids in school now, and my kids are in school at this point, and I like for them to see mom working. I feel like that's tremendously important for them to see what I do. I sold when they were 3, and they kind of have this legacy, but I didn't start the company till later in life, and I had the kids when I was 40. So now that they're teenagers, I felt like that, it was important. So the juice bar was that. And now the Be Bold bars are kind of a product of the juice bar. And I made them. I've been selling them for 5 years. I know how big of a hit they are. And in more than a decade, I have not launched a product. And this is the first thing that I have just believed in as strongly as the Pita chips that once it gets to market, you still have your doubts. It doesn't matter where you are in the process. You're like, is this going to work? But I really do. People are like, oh, these are great. It's like, well, are they great? They're just saying that they're great, or are they really great? And you start to wonder, but they really are great. So I've seen it over the last 5 years at the juice bar. So now it's, it's going, I think it'll be good. We just did our first, I literally got off a plane this morning from our first trade show. So
that's amazing. Oh my gosh. Thank you. That's so great.
I came straight from Orlando.
Wow. Amazing. Well, I'm even more thankful that you're spending time with us and with the great number of folks that we've got. And so I think with that, we've got, about 15 minutes or so left. We've got a bunch of questions. And so I'd love to dig into some of those. We've got Megan McClurg, and she says, I'm the owner of a shortbread cookie company, and we've been in the business selling wholesale for just under 2 years, are at a point now where we either automate or stop growing. You started out hand cutting and packaging your pita chips. When did you pivot to automation, and how in the world did you go about doing this? It's literally like a second job trying to figure all this out, from packaging machines to automated dough cutters. And how did you know what equipment was right for your business? So what would be your guidance, Stacy, for Megan?
Excellent question. Excellent question, because we did it. We went through it with the pita chip company, and let me tell you, it's taken a year to figure it out, making the bars. So we had to, because you go from, for example, with the bars, the story with the pita chips and hand cutting. With the bars, we're mixing, pressing, packaging, we're doing it all by hand. And so we had to, again, find out, well, what's the right equipment to do it? And at the same time, we want it to be a little different than other people. We don't want it to just be the same as all the other bars out there. So it's imperative that you go put it on the companies out there that do the machines. So go to the shortbread cookies, go to, the other cookie makers, or go to the people who, especially nowadays, it's so much faster with the internet where you can research and find these things out. Go to the equipment companies, or make a bunch of dough and drive it down there in the back of your car, or FedEx it, or do whatever you need to do, and put it on them and see, this is what we're trying to do. And this is, we have a small budget. Is there a tabletop machine? Is there a standing machine? How much room do I have? How much space do I have? How much money do I have? Figure out all of those questions, and then go to the suppliers and figure it out. When we were doing the pita chip company, we toured Cape Cod potato chips. And just by looking at how they made it, we saw how they cut potatoes. And that's how we found our cutter. We looked at the type of machine they were using. We called that machine company, and we actually bought an old Campbell's soup machine that used to cut those tiny little carrots. And we had a guy that was great with machines in the factory, and he respaced the blades so that it cut the bread into the size of a pita chip and not the size of a little mini carrot for the soup. Amazing. And that's how we found our first cutter. But it's really important, even to this day, when we're trying to, figure out some cutting issues, we go back to that same company and we say, like, look, now this is what we're trying to do. Have you got something else? Because they're a lot better. That's what they do. Yeah. So, and they want your sale. So if you have 2 or 3 of those companies that are, you're looking for, that it helps tremendously. And then make sure to tell them that you're not looking for a $100,000 machine, that you're looking for something that's going to sit on the table, or you're looking for something that's expandable, that, you want to get bigger and you want it to grow. So can I swap out the conveyor from a 3-foot to a 6-foot to a 9-foot or a 20-foot or whatever?
Amazing. So always thinking too, like, what's the next few stages or the next few steps, and how is what you're doing right now, this investment, going to help you get there?
Yeah.
Awesome. And so another question from Nana Afomanin, she says, when you are a small fish, how do you get in front of the big companies? I feel like there seems to be much more work going up the chain than finding the decision maker at the top to pitch to. Being now at the top, do you get people reaching out to you, and what avenues do you feel are better than others?
To answer your second question first, no. We don't have people reaching out to us. We kind of hoped that we would with the bars, but we don't. I can tell you what we did. I mean, first of all, last year we circulated a lot of trade shows and we walked them ourselves just to know our competition, to see what else is out there, to talk to people, to see how people are doing things, to see who are the people, who else is walking the aisles. A lot of the decision makers with the buyers are not there anymore from when we were there. So I think that for at least for us, the trade shows are invaluable. I mean, we're hoping that this time it's our second time around and people take credit for that. But if not, you have to, I mean, for us, I think it's just being at the trade shows and then finding out. And the other thing is you got to get on the horn. You have to call the company and you have to find out, who's the buyer for your category, and send them samples, follow up on the samples. In the event that that's not your forte, that you're not good at that, then find a broker or a salesperson or somebody who is. And a lot of times if you get yourself hooked up with the right people, then they're good at that. I will tell you, I am a terrible salesperson. Especially because I just want I always wanted people to eat the chips or eat the bars. So I go in there and I'm giving away the farm, right? You want sure, we'll give it. You want free fill? Sure, we'll give it. Okay. So you don't do that. Find somebody who's gonna, or if it's not you, if it's somebody else, then do that. Yeah. But it is hard to find out who's the decision maker, especially with the larger chains. Yep. The larger thing, when you're looking for that big customer, be ready. I mean, that is a blessing and a curse, because you don't want to land that customer. You're going to get one shot, and you better be sure that you're ready to produce and that you've ironed out all your screw ups before you go into there.
That is such amazing advice. Absolutely. Like, if you're what happens, you go when you spend all this effort trying to close a deal, and then the deal closes and it's like, are you ready to deliver on it?
You're really ready to deliver. Yeah.
Networks are small. People talk to one another. So you've got to make sure that for sure you're absolutely able to deliver.
And you know what? And I don't see anything, everybody feels like, oh, we're going to get into these big distributors and that's going to help us get into the big accounts. You have to remember that, let's say you get into a large distributor, how are you going to move all of that product? And is the store definitely going to take it? If they're not going to take it, then do you have an allowance for returns and for spoils and for all of these things that could, you could crash and burn right there if you get into a big one, where you may be better served going into, a smaller local guy that where you can, maybe they charge a little more, but you can work with them more closely and be on top of what's going on with your product, rather than being lost in this big ocean and trying to manage that.
That's fantastic. That's also really good advice as well. And then I think one of the questions that's kind of related to that from Kimiko Lawrence, we've had some of this in the chat as well, is you mentioned earlier about finding shared teams. So finding, being able to share sales teams or back office teams or whomever. Do you have any advice around how to approach doing a shared team, or any info around it?
Yeah. So, I know there's like our CFO from Staceys just went to work for a firm where they share, I can get you the name, I can't remember off the top of my head, but where they kind of share CFOs, where it's not necessarily where you have a full-time person, but maybe you have like that key question and you want to be sure you really did it, you're doing it right. So for example, you are going to go into that big distributor, you want to make sure your pricing is right, and you want to, or you are pricing your product, you're going to market, you better make sure that you go to market and anticipated all of your expenses to get there. And, or you're presenting a business plan, or, you make sure all your numbers are right. So that's really critical to have that. And so maybe somebody comes in on just a project basis, gets you over the hump, and then, you don't have that expense anymore. Right. Then there's there's brokers. So as far as sales, you can hire a broker to broker your product. Love them, hate them, right? They are, I don't know if you could fire more than you hire, but we certainly did with that. And then nobody wants to pioneer your product. So they're going to ask for retainers and for this, and it could get very expensive. So you have to do, from my perspective anyway, we did a lot of bootstrapping, and you have to do that. And so if you come to a broker and you don't have money to pay a retainer, then be ready to hand over 90 or 100 of your accounts and say, okay, here's something for you to manage that you can make a commission on, even though we don't have the money to pay you now. Because nobody's going to want to go out and pioneer your product, even if they're a believer and they love your chips or your bars or whatever, your cookies. Yeah. Nobody's going to want to do that. They don't want to
be the first one, right? They want to make sure that there's something.
I put in all this work on my own time. So just be prepared to hand something over if you have expectations from them.
That's great. And then I think we've got a couple minutes left. There's one question that we can look to end on, which is from Sharon O'Donnell. Stacy, congrats on all of your success. It's so inspiring. At any point in your journey, did you have a mentor of any kind? And if so, what were or are the qualities that make that relationship valuable?
I would have to say we had many mentors, and it depended on the stage of the growth of the company. And we had nothing formal, but between us, we sort of always had people that we could go to ask. Even when I was first starting, my sister has her MBA, so a lot of business questions I could run by her, and she was in the restaurant business, so she helped with me with getting the cart set up, and I made stuff at her plant. I spoke about the guy from Smart Food, right? And I called him. Another time I saw an article in Natural Wholesale Bakery magazine or something. There's big spread on this chip company, which you might know it now. At the time it was tiny, but they were called Boulder Chips. And they were out in Colorado, and we were back in Massachusetts, and we had no plan to go national. So they were in the same category, and we were tiny, and they were much larger. They had 50 distributors or something, and we had 5. And so in advance, and really, really important, if you have somebody and you're going to be able to get them on the phone, is to have your questions ready in advance. And I had my questions. I sent them over real quick so that they could eyeball them, and we can make it a quick phone call. They were kind enough to stay on the phone with me for a half hour or whatever. And, but I just reached them because I saw their article in the magazine and reached out to them. And a lot of the information we got from them, the Smart Food guy, about marketing. I just loved the way they marketed in the Northeast. So he was able to take some time. I'll never forget, because he actually handed me my sell sheet back at the end of the meeting. And he said, no, you don't want me to keep this, because this is money and you need it. And so he handed me back my sell sheet and sent me out the door like this. But it's a lot to be learned from that.
Yeah, that's incredible.
So I don't think we didn't have one person, but we always reached out and had people that we could ask. That's
incredible. And now when I think about, what you're doing to help support women entrepreneurs through the Stacys Rise program, can you maybe talk a little bit about what's important to you in this program with Pepsi and Frito and the Stacy's Pita Chip brand now? Why y'all decided to pursue this to support other entrepreneurs, other female entrepreneurs?
So this is the kind of thing that I would have loved to have done when I was at the helm of the company. To be able to help other women and to kind of get through that, and I certainly, if I'm lunging across the warehouse, I didn't have time to do any of that. But this is the kind of program that sometimes all you need is like that $10,000 or that that little bit of advice or that right answer to just kind of get you over that hump and send you in the right direction. And then you've avoided that pitfall where you've kind of gotten over it. Yeah.
That's amazing. And for those who are tuning in and who are wondering about the Stacey's Rise project, the applications are open through June 21st. What it means is that 5 women entrepreneurs in the food and bev space are going to be awarded 20 grand in cash grants. They'll have the chance to meet and work with Pepsi and Frito Lay executives. And then there's 1 grand prize winner as well that will earn an additional $100,000 to grow their business. Everyone who applies on Stacey's Rise through the application process, that everybody will be able to receive support regardless of whether or not they win through the Women Made community on Alice. And if folks want to learn more and apply, they can head to staceysrise.helloalice.com. So Stacey, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for hopping off a plane and hopping on this Facebook Live cast with us and answering some of the questions from the audience. Your journey has been absolutely incredible. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with the folks that are here with us today, around what you're doing and what you've done in the past?
So, well, first of all, I want to say thank you to you guys, because I wish that there was we talked a lot about networking and resources, and I wish that there was a program like this for us, both the Stacey's Rise program and what you're doing to have helped us along the way. So seriously, this is a great resource, and anybody who's on the line, I imagine that you've taken advantage of it, or you should if you haven't. But I think the importance of having a great product, nobody wants to call their baby ugly, right? So just make sure that when you go to market, you definitely put it out there to people other than your friends and family and get really valuable feedback that way. And as far as the bars, if anybody wants to visit our website is beboldbars.com, and it's under construction at the moment, but bookmark it, because hopefully in the next month that'll be going as well. You can order bars from there, but you at least get to see the packaging, and maybe you'll be able to see it in your own store locally one day as well.
Amazing. Wonderful. Well, thank you, everybody. And thank you again, Stacey. Best of luck with your new endeavors. Here's the Stacey's Rise Pita chip bags that talk about all the great, amazing women entrepreneurs. We have these in our office every day. I eat these every day. They're so good.
Good.
Yeah. But thank you again for your time, and look forward to seeing how things go for you, and wish you the best.
Yeah, I can't wait to see who wins the project too.
It'll be so exciting.
Good luck to whoever has to evaluate them.
Amazing.
Right,
wonderful.
Thanks,
Thanks a lot, Stacey. Take care. Bye, everyone.